Dun, dun. Okay, yay, hey everyone. This is Keisha and Lauren. We're here, we're live, we're with you. I'm going to change my Facebook settings really quick. And then I'll do my normal spiel. Okay, edit audience, public. All right, we're good. So I'm Lauren. I'm the associate pastor at Messiah. This is Keisha. She's my friend from school. We're here an hour early, and really the reason is because I want Mexican food tonight, and I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait in line. So it's like, we're going to do this early, and it's cool with Keisha because she's moving today. So thank you for still doing this, Keisha, even though you're in the middle of a move. Wilderness Stories is something that I thought would be cool to do because I was reading a book by Rachel Held Evans, and she talks about wilderness being like this detour that God's people often take on their way to deliverance. You know, it's like we want to just be there, but that's just all throughout the biblical narrative. That never happens. You know, God always delivers God's people. Right. But not usually directly. We usually are like meandering. So it's really cool to hear people's stories about their meanderings, because when people share that with us, we're all strengthened. You know, we're all like, okay, I can do this. So that is the premise. And I want Keisha to tell us who she is. Like, who are you, Keisha?
No problem. First, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to everyone. Those within biological, those surrogacy, those foster care, those who just nourished everyone through their love. We just say Happy Mother's Day to all. Also, thank you, Lauren. Happy Mother's Day to you, too, for such a wonderful opportunity. This is an amazing experience, and I'm excited. So my name is Keisha R. Holmes Dukes. I'm a pastor for 2 Point Charge. That's United Methodist lingo for one pastor with two churches. I pastor Mount Zion and St. James United Methodist Church. I'm a native of Baltimore. I found roots in Pocomoke by way of Wesley in Washington, D.C. So you never know the provisions God makes at the place of promise if you just show up. You know, so I thank God for provision made at Wesley. I'm a wife. I'm a dog mommy. I have a dog. His name's Peanut. You should see his dog chain. It says Peanut Dukes. He's officially part of the family.
He snuck in before this all started.
Yes, he did. He's a little shy, so he's here, but he doesn't want anybody to see him. And I'm just excited to be. I think I'm a gospel rapper and spoken word artist.
Oh my gosh. I should have had you do that for us. If you feel like the Spirit leads you, let's just
go for it.
Yeah.
I got you.
Okay.
Before this is over, I'll make sure to render something for everyone. How's that?
Okay. That's great. Oh my gosh.
I finished doing something for University of Baltimore with their vaccine chat with the young adults, trying to get more the younger adult demographic to get vaccinated. So it was an exciting experience. But I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Keisha. So Keisha and I were student pastors at Wesley. When you're getting your Master's of Divinity, you have to do something called PMM. What's that stand for? Practice of Mission and Ministry.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you happen to be the pastor already, they'll let you fulfill that requirement in the churches you serve. So then we had this policy group. And that's how I've gotten to know Keisha, who I just love her. I don't think you know Keisha. I'm serious. Being in that group with Keisha was amazing. You know, she is on fire. The things that she says, I am yes, we could do it. I don't know what we're gonna do, but that's just the energy that Keisha has. So
thank you. Thank you. It was a blessing meeting you, Lauren, because you balanced me too. You have oil. I always tell people that's my way of saying that you're anointed. You have oil, Lauren, okay?
Thank you, Keisha.
No problem. I really appreciate it. And I'm grateful that our paths crossed.
I know, me too. And Keisha, you only have a semester left, right?
Yes, I just registered for my last 3 classes.
That is amazing. I have 3 semesters left. That's not terrible.
It's not. So remember that. It is not.
It'll go. 3 seems okay, but the problem is I'm on the 3rd lap of the mile. No, the 2nd lap of the mile. When I ran track, which only lasted less than a season before I got shin splints in high school, second lap of the mile is like horrible because you can't see the end. I sort of feel like I'm there. Like, this is great,
Oh,
but I'm just not close enough to being done. Denise said hello. So Denise goes to Messiah. Hi, Denise. Everybody else, if
hi,
you're with us,
Denise.
feel free to, like, chat us so we know. I wanted to,
Chat.
yes, chat. It makes it so much better. I read something this morning. Keisha, do you know who Joe Saxton is?
That name sounds familiar, but not off the top of my head. Talk
So
to me.
I don't know like exactly how to introduce her. She is like a leadership, like a Christian leadership kind of coach woman. She's amazing. She's a preacher. So she posted some, I would love to be coached by her. She has these groups that maybe I'll do one day.
Okay.
She wrote something on Facebook today, and I'm going to read it to everybody.
Awesome.
It's about Mother's Day. It says, it's okay. It's okay to be wherever you're at today. Our stories are different, so there's no cookie cutter way to commemorate Mother's Day. For some of us, it's joy and celebration, while for others, it's exhaustion and added pressure. For some, it's gratitude, and for others, it's grief and loss. For some, today highlights the depth of wonderful relationships and legacy, while for others, it underlines the depths of dysfunction and brokenness in our families. For some, it's a combination of seemingly contradictory emotions as we hold multiple stories at the same time. Some of us revel in this day, others get through this day. So I want us to know it's okay. It's okay to be wherever you are at today. And let's remember all the women around us today. May our words and actions say it's okay. Much love and God bless you.
Wow.
So I just thought, that's good. All right. So Keisha, I warned you that I'm going to ask you, what Bible character do you like the most, or who like jumps out at you? Who jumps off the page?
I will say there's two of them. I love
Okay.
these two characters, Moses and Elijah.
Okay, and why?
You know, it's weird because I'm a woman, right? I'm a budding woman.
I love it. Well, I usually will say Paul or John the Baptist.
Oh yeah, those are good too.
Because they're like weird, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of weird. So anyway, go ahead.
I love, because Moses and I have a lot in common. I stuttered growing up. I did not start talking until I was 10.
Wow, really?
Yeah, that's part of my testimony. So I had a speech impairment, and it was caused by neurological defect. And the doctors said that and long story short, I would have to learn how to speak again. I would learn how to conjugate verbs. And
Did you speak at one time and then you stopped speaking, or?
No, when I started talking, they noticed something. My grandmother noticed that something wasn't right because I couldn't get a word out. And the word that did come out didn't make sense. And it was at the age where I should have been forming words, and I should have been forming some sort of thought. Then I went to the doctor, and then they said, it was a cognitive delay, and I just need some special attention. And my grandmother was like, okay, but something else isn't right. Thank God for grandmas. She raised me. And so we went back to another doctor, and they were like, oh, well, it's deeper than the cognitive disadvantage, and it's neurological. Not only it was difficult for me to form thoughts, but it was difficult for me to transmit those thoughts into words. And then what would happen is, between the thought and the words, my brain would get jumbled up. So when I would speak, I would stutter. It was hard growing up. I had to ask teachers, my mother and my grandmother had asked teachers, please don't call on her in the middle of class, because the nervousness and me not knowing how the words would come out. So I had speech therapy. I had to learn how to speak again. I had to learn how to conjugate verbs. I had to learn the basics.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And then one day when I was 10, I woke up and I had said a whole sentence without stuttering or anything. And so I tell people it was God's grace that gave me my voice.
That is really cool.
And so that's how I relate a lot to Moses, because, the Lord did put other megaphones in my life to help speak for me. And so I was able to have that confidence. Yeah. So that's that. And the liberating character that Moses was involved in. I think that his presence, along with God's presence, divine's presence within the wilderness, reminds us that even in dry places, there's still hope for divine liberation.
Totally. Oh my
And
gosh.
so I know that that is one of my callings, is to be a leader, is to be one of those liberating leaders.
Yep.
And
I
I
think you
love,
already are.
oh, thank you.
You're already doing that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I've seen
I'm
it over the
trying.
last year throughout the pandemic and everything.
Yeah, because we there's always been a negative connotation with wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And with the pandemic and pre-pandemic, even going into the pandemic, because before the pandemic, we had the racial tension within our nation,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's where God is punishing us. We're in the wilderness. Well, no, not necessarily. Wilderness,
Yeah.
as Walter Brueggemann said so beautifully, is just a landless place, right, where we
Mm-hmm.
grow to depend on God's in totality.
Yeah.
So this isn't a place of punishment. It's a place of development and growth.
Totally.
Like a liminal season, right?
Yeah.
The door is closed behind you. There's a door open in front of you. And with all that's happening, we're scared of that open door, because what
Yeah.
if it's
Oh
leaving?
my gosh.
So
Yep.
the wilderness is just a liminal season where God is saying, don't really focus on where you're going right now, but really, how can we manage being a village and community of hope where we are? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think so many times we're so forward thinking that we gloss over the immediate care and attention that souls need right here in front of us.
Oh my gosh. I remember having a very similar conversation last summer at the pool. Oh yay. There's Tina. She's amazing. And
Tina.
and I realized, I know that, there's hope and a different kind of future for our country. But the reality is that a lot of stuff is going to not change as fast as we want it to. And so we have to be willing to be where we are. Like kind of what you're saying in this season. How are we proclaiming Christ's hope and healing to the world right now, even before everything happens the way we want it to, kind of thing?
Absolutely. And and there's an older black preacher by the name of Otis Moss, Reverend
Hmm.
Otis Moss. He has a son, Otis Moss III. They're both part of the UCC Church, Trinity in Chicago. And his father made history because he was one of the first black to be registered to vote.
Wow.
And in one of his sermons, he preached about prophetic grief. And he said, prophetic grief is when we can come together as a community and grieve together, because
Yeah.
the sacredness in grieving where we are, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that the idea with that and where we are, as you were saying, is, when we focus on where we are, then there's a hope of knowing that no matter where our boat lands or where our boat docks in this process,
Mhm.
we will be okay as a community coming together as one. We will
Yeah.
make do. Um, I'm reminded of the traumatic experience in Jeremiah, right?
Yeah.
And people wanted to be free. People wanted to get to that open door. And who would blame them?
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want that freedom? And remember the passage where Jeremiah prophetically declares what it's going to be 70 years instead of the 2. So get your family,
Oh my
start
gosh.
planning, start
Yeah.
staying where you are. But the nuance of that moment, right? As we question, well, what kind of divine setting is this, right?
Yeah.
Why would a divine presence, this divine energy, who some of us call God, why would this divine presence tell us to settle? No, just because you're planting or cultivating doesn't mean that you're settling.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that we're just trying to make do where we are so that
Yeah.
we can learn to come together as a community. I think it's one of those moments where it's just like we got to learn to get along, because no matter where you go, you can't make it by yourself.
Yeah.
You're always going to need a community with you. And I think that's just where we are, especially within this pandemic season.
Yeah.
We have to put aside our human differences. We have to learn how to change our language, become more interfaith,
Yep.
interreligious, um,
Yeah.
and we really have to learn to make do where we are. And so, to go back to what you originally asked me, that's why I've relate a lot to Moses, because hopefully I don't strike the rock. That's the part of the story that I pray that I keep together. I control my emotions, because souls will take you there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But we have to, as Dr. Denise Hopkins from Wesley told us, has explained to us, learn how to find that balance between the complaint and God's care. As a leader.
This is why I loved, now everyone knows, like, oh, this is why Lauren loves being in class with Keisha. Because I'm like, yes, I didn't even remember that she said that. And that's so true.
I owe everything. My Hebrew Bible experience and how I digest it, I owe it all to Dr. Denise Hopkins, because how she just broke everything down and explained it. It's just, even biblically, like, look at the story, the Protestant Bible that we call, our faith story, right? Every narrative, every resounding story needs one another.
Yep. But what she pushed back on me a lot with, and I still feel like I don't get it, is like the violence of God in the Hebrew Bible, reconciling that with the God of love. The closest I've gotten to it is to be reminded that if I'm a person who's suffered from some kind of severe oppression or injustice, I need a God who's going to take care of me.
Absolutely. And I think that, and another important part of that is learning how to wrestle with that, right? Because I sat in her class with the same tension, right?
Yeah.
But what she reminded us is these were frail pens picked up by frail people.
Yeah.
And just because it's the word of God doesn't mean it's the word coming directly from God. Like, there's some places we need to learn how to wrestle and how to say, God, I'm having an issue with Joshua. I'm having an issue with colonization. I'm having an issue with this.
Yeah.
And when you start wrestling, you realize, it is okay to say, I don't know, but what I do know is that the divine energy that walks with us would not condone that.
Right.
So let's try to find a place of rest for us together. So,
yeah, exactly. Awesome. And Moses is one of my favorites, because just like, he has everything. He has the 10 Commandments, he has like the burning bush. He has all this access to God, but he still needs more. He still needs more assurance. He still needs more from God. It's like not good enough for him. And he's not hesitant to like say, look, I need this. I need this. I need this. I need more. Every time God says, fine, he says, I need more. And God continues to do it. I'm just like, that's amazing,
Yeah. So, and Elijah was my last one. Only reason I said Elijah is because I love the transaction with Elijah and the angels when Elijah is exhausted and weary from confronting King Ahab. So, Elijah confronts him, right? You're praying to these other pagan energies that are pretty much monopolizing, right, on the vulnerability of God's people. And King Ahab, made some reservations, and Elijah's life is at risk because he decides to speak truth to power.
Yep. And
Elijah considers the mental health within his faith was just like, listen, I don't think I can continue. I'm about to take my own life. And God says, God sends some angels and said, here's something to eat.
Wow.
Go rest.
Yeah.
And when he's in that cave experience, right? The theophany wasn't in the fire, wasn't in the great wind, wasn't in the great storm, but it was in that small, calm whisper.
That is amazing. Yes.
And that's always been my experience with God.
Totally.
speaking truth to power can be exhausting. You know, it's like, what is the point? Nobody wants to listen.
Mm-hmm. And they don't like you in the
They
meantime.
don't like
You know, you're not
they,
popular. So
you
you're doing
know,
all this work and you're like, I'm just getting beaten up. Yeah.
and traditionally, with the dogmatic languages and traditions that we're in, why, who's this young preacher bringing this type of fire,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, into the pulpit? And it's just, sometimes we have to push back on some of the traditions we've been taught and use what's been given to us to dismantle and disrupt these systems that have been built around us that's preventing us. I was going to actually put the post the other day, and I got carried, I got sidetracked, but the post was going to say, treat everyone the way you want to be treated. Side note, that everyone is God's people. So say that. So treat God's people, right? Because what happens is we compartmentalize who we want to treat and how we're going to treat them.
Yep. And everyone is God's people. Every single person.
Everyone is God's people.
Mm-hmm.
So when you put that into the equation, it's like, whoa.
It's hard.
I get it.
The other thing about the systems and everything, I know that there's always a time and a place for everything that's put, for many things that are put into play. But when you look at the church today, well, we know we need change. So maybe the things that we've been taught that we're afraid to leave behind, maybe it's time to leave them behind. But yeah, it's scary. It goes back to that liminal season you were talking about, what happens when we close the door on some of those traditions or things that we've always done, not knowing exactly the future.
Yeah, because for some cultures, those traditions were a security blanket.
Mm-hmm.
Especially to the oppressed church of those people of color,
Mm-hmm.
and other ethnicities, right? So some of those traditions were a security blanket.
Mm-hmm.
It kept us connected.
Mm-hmm.
It kept us involved. So you want to respect it, but at the same time, let those persons know, God is innovator. God is always looking to do something new.
Mm-hmm.
And just because we're embracing newness doesn't mean that we're disregarding the systems that brought us this far.
Mm-hmm.
What we're saying is that it was good for that moment,
Right?
but it's not necessarily good for right now. So what's something new we can do? What are some new ways we can confront King Ahab and still stay connected enough to push God's agenda here on earth?
That just reminds me too of in church history, learning about in the United States, for example, for so long we had so many different immigrant communities, and that was really religion was very important because exactly what you're saying, it was this commonality. It held people together, and I know that we still do have people are just moving all throughout the world all the time, but it feels different, so I wonder what will hold us together today. What are we using as that piece? It's just
That's a good question. That is a good question. And
I'm thinking that it is our faith, but what is tethering us to it? What are the stick?
I think that if we uncover our insecurities, I really think that I really think in this liminal season we have to have the tough conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really think that if we start peeling the onion back layer by layer, I think we can get to those connecting components, as you were discussing, that will keep us connected. But I think right now we're buried underneath of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah, and I really think it's time that we have church discussions, changing our language, really putting it out there and saying, hey, it's okay for us to discuss this.
Yeah,
because I really think that if we start peeling these layers back, I really believe that we can be a different church post-pandemic than we were.
Yeah.
I do.
I think it's exciting. Okay, Keisha, I'm going to mute myself to yell at my child. No, I'm not going to yell, but I am going to be What are you doing? Hold on.
Okay.
I don't even think there is a mute. Oh, good.
They're enjoying their life. Mhm. We have a commercial break. If you're thirsty, there's a cup. If you get a cup and put something in it, you can drink it and it will quench your thirst. Cups are available Amazon and any other place. And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Gosh, that is awesome. Okay, so oh good, Scott's here. Do you know Scott? Scott goes to Wesley.
Hi, Scott.
Now you know him. That's what he looks like. That little bubble.
Look, Scott, and guess what? And when we peel the onion, they say onions make us cry, right?
Whoa.
So not only do we have to peel the onion, but we're gonna have to be prepared to face some raw emotions with that, right? So
maybe we should do our own little podcast. I could talk to you all day.
Oh yes, this is giving me so much life because I actually wanted to start a podcast last year. This before I transitioned over to United Methodist. I wanted to have a podcast called Baptist or Nah, because I was Baptist, and I wanted to talk to like persons who were like non-Baptist or those who walking different faith journeys, and just see our commonality, because I was always interested in that. But now that I'm United Methodist, I have to come up with another name for my podcast.
You're new. You should think about it.
United Methodist or Nah. That's gonna be my podcast.
So Keisha, all right, what time is it? It is
3:25.
3:25. So our goal is that we're gonna be done at 3:45 because Keisha needs to move. She's in Baltimore right now. She's moving to where?
We're officially growing roots in Pocomoke City.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna let her move today, but I want to ask you like the big question.
Okay.
And then you can answer it however you want. You could just take over and just tell your stories, or I'll just keep peppering you with questions. So however it flows, that's how it's going to go. When did God become more than just a word to you in your life?
That is a good question. God became more than just a word to me when my grandmother passed away. I was a lot of people don't know this about me. But I was my grandmother's caregiver when I was 11. I was 11 years old taking care of my grandmother. My grandmother raised me. My father was absent. My mother, was absent as well. My grandparents took me in. My grandmother became extremely ill. Wow. Financially, it was hard for us to find care. And so my grandfather said, we need to find someone. And I volunteered. He was hesitant because I was so young. Mm-hmm. But I believe that moment taught me responsibility and maturity at an early age. Wow. And I took care of her.
Imagine that. Yeah.
What'd you say?
I can't imagine an 11-year-old being tasked with that. Did you say you took care of her for 11 years?
Mm-hmm. And my grandfather felt the same way you did. My grandfather was so against it. Mm-hmm. But it was one of the things like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Because
you have no other options. Yeah.
And, families of color, unfortunately, were subject to a lot of politics, especially within the economic and healthcare realm. So growing up, it was just, school, church, grandma, school, church, grandma. And then I was 13 and she transitioned. She passed away. And I was devastated, like who wouldn't be? And then one day I just picked up the Bible, and like that Elijah experience I told you about, the Lord spoke in a very cool wind. And I heard the divine tell me, you're mine now. And I said, what?
Wow. So did you hear that audibly, like an impression on your heart? Was it like a voice? Both?
It was a voice and an impression. Wow. It was like, it was audible within me. Like I was walking and I heard, like, how like you talk to yourself. I heard it, but I knew it wasn't coming from me. And it's literally stopped me dead in my tracks, and I started crying. Wow. Because I knew from there my life would be dedicated to ministry. Wow. I didn't know how I was 14 at the time. I didn't know how it was gonna look. Yeah. All I knew was that I was on assignment. And then some other life tragedies occurred, and divine told me again, you're mine. And I said, okay. And I entered into my wilderness experience.
Yeah.
I packed up my little bit that I had and I moved. And unfortunately, there were some people who said they'll be there that ended up walking away. Um, Promises that were empty. However, I kept pushing. I tell people, the R in my middle name is actually my grandmother's first name, but also tell people the R in my name means resilience, because I refused to give up. I couldn't do it. I had my moments now. Don't get me wrong. I don't want people to think, oh, this is one of those other cliche inspirational speeches. No, 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 no. I had plethora of opportunities to give up. I remember one time I lived in my car, and I remember being tempted to drive off and never return back to Maryland. I didn't know where I was going to go. I remember that.
Is it like, did you have anybody who was supporting you at that time? Did you have anybody in your life that you felt like you could go to, talk to, or anything? Or were you feeling kind of alone?
I was feeling alone because, growing up, I always had a charismatic spirit, especially in church.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard for me to explain to persons what was going on, because this is Keisha. This is the one who's on fire. This is the one who always participates in church. This is the one who loves the Lord. Who is she to go through this? I felt at that time, me being young, I thought that was going to taint other person's faith experiences.
Interesting. So you actually made that connection. So you were intentionally kind of saying no, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. Wow.
And then when I got older, it was just like, you can share your story now. Because you can let everyone know you're still human. You can let everyone know that you can still have emotions. And and my reference to that, I always tell people, I always mention this. If Jesus can experience what he did in Gethsemane and still end up on top early Sunday morning, if you know what I mean, let me indulge in my Baptist roots.
Yeah.
If Jesus can experience not just Calvary, but Gethsemane, I know for sure that I can pray and I can still experience my emotions. I think that's the part of our faith that we're afraid of. We're afraid of the questioning. We're afraid of the challenging. We're afraid of the wrestling. We're afraid to say, oh, I'm praying, but I'm still having unbeliefs about something. Or I'm praying, but I'm still nervous. I'm praying, and I want to tell people that's okay.
Yeah. Because we forget that at Gethsemane, Jesus was sweating blood, crying with his disciples. So how come a lot of times in pastoral ministry, we're told to sort of make sure we're not friends with the people, dual relationships? I get it a little bit, but at the same time, who are we following? And then what did he do? And he made himself vulnerable with all people, everyone,
Yeah, but I still also think of, some of the boundaries that were created, right?
Yes, for sure.
But I definitely understand, in Paul's words, why you would be betwixt between the two, because I definitely understand, but I think that the boundaries part was just saying, you have to make sure that you can link up with some people who
you're having your needs met.
Path that you're on.
Yeah. I get that part too.
Right, because what we for instance, what we have discussed in our colloquy, in our PM&M, we wouldn't been able to discuss it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's for sure true. Yeah.
Now imagine having those conversations we had in PM&M in the church council meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. I see, Keisha. Oh my gosh.
Okay. So there's just some, it's just some.
Yeah, you need everybody, but you can be vulnerable as a human being, as a pastor with your flock, in different ways.
Absolutely. And I think that's the operative phrase you just said,
Mm-hmm.
in various ways. It
Mm-hmm.
can be different for different people in different situations.
Yeah.
I read a book, Susan Johnson Cook. She was on the administration for former President Obama.
Huh.
And she wrote, it was a guide to the sisters in ministry. And one of the rules she wrote, because it's like to create, because we have some strikes against us, right?
Mm-hmm.
First strike is a gender thing. We're women. Now, the other strike that some of us have is then also our race. So not only am I a woman, but I'm a Black woman, right? And then some of the other strikes we have is our age. I know
Mm-hmm.
you get this because we're young, we're
Yeah.
women,
Hopefully. Yeah.
and how dare I be a woman of color at that? Okay,
Yeah.
so I say all of that to say, a lot of that gets tangled up with relationships and with how people parishioners receive certain things. And so
Mm-hmm.
with those healthy boundaries and that vulnerability, and it's different, you say it's different ways for different people, because um some people are looking for reasons
Mm-hmm.
not to follow, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, because
Mm-hmm.
because some people don't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another reason I believe why the church is missing the young adults, as the one article said, because because to follow means that you have to let some guards down.
Hmm.
But I think that if we can decorate that enough to say, hey, you can be vulnerable, you can let your guard down while still building standards in your life to say, hey, I can have this moment with you, but it doesn't have to be as vulnerable as I would, like, as I said, as I would be with some of my colleagues, or you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think that is the part that we have to really start pressing upon people's hearts. Let your guard down, but also know your limitation.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jesus, know when to retreat. Know when, but the difference is we learned our lesson. So when Jesus was in his retreat, some people disturbed him. Lord, where are
Yeah.
you?
I
But
love
we
that.
learned our lesson, right? We
Yeah.
learned our lesson. When you retreat, you get a phone call, ignore. I was like, I wonder what happened if Jesus had like an iPhone or something.
Oh man.
Like, like he looked at he's one of his retreat sessions, like, oh, Peter's calling. Oh, I'll talk to him later. He'll do like the customized text message, customized. Can I
Oh
call
my
you back
gosh.
later?
I do. I love I really love remembering that Jesus spent a lot of time by himself and spent a lot of time apart, and he left a place often before we would have considered it done. He went for a certain piece of it and then needed to go.
Oh wow! You know what the Spirit just dropped in me while you said
Sure.
that? Because Jesus probably was trying to trust the disciples with the rest of the story.
That's so good. Yeah.
Wow. Like there's times, thank you, Spirit Divine. Like there's times where we may feel that Jesus is departed from us, but Jesus is right there. It's just the fact that Jesus' Spirit is trusting us with the rest of the story.
Yeah. That's
What will
cool.
you do?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
That's cool. I'm
That's
gonna
good.
keep that one.
Wow.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Lauren, for that. Wow.
Um,
That's for
okay.
somebody. I'm sorry,
I
can I say that
know.
one more time?
For us.
Whoever's listening, Jesus, Holy Spirit Divine, Creator is trusting you with the pen. Stop devaluing yourself in the story. The Holy Spirit is giving you the pen.
Like God is relying on us,
God is relying
even
on
without constant, he's saying kind of run with it a little bit here. Yeah.
Wow. That's good.
I want to circle you back to before I got you sidetracked. Your wilderness begins with you're on your own, you're living in your car, you're trying to be independent and kind of strong because you feel like you need to keep that up so that your people in your life, so that you don't like tank this message that you thought you had taught them or something like that. So go
Right.
from there.
And so it was hard for me to talk to people because of that. I had someone that I became vulnerable with, let my guard down. They said, get the apartment, we'll work with you. because we don't want you to be, in your car or wandering around. Did it, but then some things happened and they left me hanging. They also embarrassed me in front of the church. That was my experience with church hurt.
Wow.
And I left. I was in a very, very, very low place. I lost a lot of weight. People are, oh, you're so cute. But I always tell people, just because a person is skinny doesn't mean they're healthy or they look and fly. You always just watch, because you never know what a person is going through. I lost so much weight. And then I worked at a aftercare program. And I didn't, by this time I got my car taken. My car was repossessed. I got evicted from my apartment. I left the church where I was, because I told you what was going on. And I was at wit's end, literally hanging on by the end of the rope. And then what happened was, I was walking to my job I'm in Baltimore, so my job was about 20-minute walk from the subway station, because downtown Baltimore, the transit was always slow and I didn't want to be late again. And while I was walking, this cool wind just blew over me. And I just started crying. And I said, God, I feel you. What are you saying? And God says, I need you to trust me, because I'm about to do some things. And I said, okay. And so that's when the next week I met this guy who was super fly, but also super young. And I didn't want to give him a chance because he was way younger than me. But him and I started talking. We became really good friends. Then we started dating. And the next thing I know, 6 years later, he becomes my husband.
Wow.
So I met him. So that was one thing God did. He gave me someone I could trust and be vulnerable with. So it's like, check.
Yes.
Then after I met my who would be my future husband, I then met a really good friend who owned a business, and she offered me a position at the daycare where I owned, and I ended up going far in the daycare. And then from there, I got an apartment, and then from there, I got another car that was paid off.
Wow.
And then God is saying, all right, you think I'm finished? And I was like, no, I know you're not finished. So what is next? And I got 2 phone calls the same day, Lauren. This is a true story. 2 phone calls, 2 separate people, same day, different time zones. One of my colleagues moved to a state to pastor a church. He attended Wesley. One of my other friends grandfather pastored a church in Baltimore. She was graduating from Wesley. They called me the same day. Hey, you were on my mind. Have you considered seminary?
Wow.
And I said, no.
Oh my gosh.
I think you should go to Wesley. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I'm not like y'all. Like y'all, like in the Baptist church, for many who don't know, the Baptist church, most Baptist churches don't require a theological education. It's pretty much on the discernment or the I forgot the other word. I can't pick the other word, but it's like on the discretion of the pastor and the committee. So I'm like, you're a pastor, you know what I mean? Like you're an assistant. Like you guys have a place in the Baptist church. Me, I'm wandering in my wilderness. I don't.
Were they Baptist?
Yeah, they were Baptist,
okay.
but they were in higher ministries, so I could understand why they were in seminary, So I thought about it and I was like, okay, register for Wesley. I was a fish out of water. Because I did my undergrad in theater. I didn't have any theological background. You would never believe this talking, but yeah, I didn't have any theological background.
Wow. Yeah.
Wesley literally was Greek to me. Sitting in class, people using big theological terms. I'm like, oh yeah, I would write the terms down, like research that when I get home.
Yeah.
Okay. Went to Wesley, and God was like, this is the first step. Long story short, I did not have the finances because the church where I attended wouldn't financially support.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to another seminary, but that seminary was very insensitive to women,
Hmm.
and it was hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Lord, I need help. If you, just like Elijah and Moses, right? If you want me to do this, you need to make something happen, because you called
Yeah.
me here. I didn't want to
Yeah.
be here.
Yep.
Why would you call me here and leave me hanging? I had student loans I had to get out of default. Like, why would you do that? Long
Yep.
story short, the Lord made a way. All of that to say, I ended up meeting my United Methodist guardian angels.
Hmm.
They knew people that knew people. Next thing I know, I had to walk away from my previous employment at the daycare because I was growing and budding and just needed that time.
Mm-hmm.
2 months later, I got a phone call. Hey, have you ever heard of Pocomoke City? No. Okay, well, great. Well, we still want to know. You want to be a pastor? And I
Oh
said,
my gosh.
okay. They're like, well, they have a parsonage, free of rent. And I'm like, free of rent. And
Whoa.
like all of this started to, bring back. I remember when I didn't even have money to pay rent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a parsonage, rent free. I don't have to take out student loans.
That's
I'm
amazing.
walking, and then it was like, okay. And then last year was hard.
Mm-hmm.
My mom,
Yep.
losing a good friend of mine to breast cancer, losing my mentor from Morgan, and also losing we called her a little cousin, but losing her. And then it was like, Lord, what's going on? And the Lord was just like, I understand. Let me comfort you.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it was just ministry was expanding, or is expanding.
Mm-hmm.
So now I use those tragedies within a ministry setting. So
Yep.
next year, I really want to focus on a program called Community Joy Box. And I really want to help families. Yes, Lord. I really want to help families and churches and communities who are in a grieving process. Community Joy Box will really just give the necessary resources for grieving,
That
counselors,
sounds so cool. Yeah.
Bible study, things of that nature,
Yeah.
help us heal together. So,
Wait, so you're starting that?
yeah. So it started off as a project for my class this semester,
Oh, cool.
and now I'll say, Lord, if this is okay, can we go forward? And so that's one of my ministry projects that I really want to work
That
on.
is really neat.
Box.
I feel like that's invaluable because if you think about people struggling with mental health, especially during this pandemic, mental health like resources are super expensive. It's just inaccessible, even for people sometimes with the money. So yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I definitely want to work with, team up, partner with professionals who are willing to either render pro bono or at a discounted rate for the
Yeah,
children.
like a
And
sliding scale or something like that.
on it, yeah, and then from there, I do want to branch off into like a smaller clergy group,
Mm-hmm.
for mental health issues, for those who are, I don't want to say issues, change my language, mental health obstacles or mental health concerns that
Yeah.
a lot of clergy are facing,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can come back together and really lead, because I do believe you cannot pour from an empty pitcher,
Right.
and you cannot lead if if you still feel trapped in this ditch.
Yeah.
So we need each other to bring each other out.
So your appointments were, I've been with you like for 2 years of them. They've been good, but they haven't been easy.
I've only had one appointment. This is the only
I
appointment I've
mean,
had.
your dual charge. So I guess I'm thinking of your two churches. It's not like it's been
Oh, got
a
you.
walk.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it hasn't been like a walk in the park, but it's been growth, right? Like that has been amazing to see the different things that you've learned. I'm like, wow, it's kind of incredible to think that this has been your first thing in pastoral ministry. It's like you've been awesome, handling anything that's come your way.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. It's just I'm learning in the season to reach out to
Mm-hmm.
people, not to and to remind myself in this liminal season,
Mm-hmm.
that the door behind me is closed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have to keep reminding myself that it's closed. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and that closure is not suppression. That
Mm-hmm.
closure isn't blanketing fire, you know, thinking that, you know, if I sweep it underneath the rug, it's gonna go away. No. That close means that it's done.
Yeah.
It's finished. I've
Yeah.
been through there. I see an open door in front of me. I'm not quite sure if I want to walk through it
Yeah.
because I don't,
Yeah.
but where I am
Yeah.
now, I
Yeah.
just pray that the Lord can utilize the gifts given to edify the community in God's kinship,
Yep.
because that's my mantra. I
Yep.
walk I walk in that mantra each and every day, and that mantra is, if you don't see God's kinship where I am, then I'm not doing my job right.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't see God's light, I'm not doing my job right.
Yep. That's really what we're called to do. Each and every one of us. Exactly like what you're saying. We're called to do it exactly where we find ourselves in this moment. So whether we've arrived, whether we haven't even started the journey, wherever we are, that's where it is. So,
Absolutely.
all right. So Keisha, I know that I would love to go down a million other like rabbit hole stories, but I'm going to let you move. But what would you tell people in your parting words? Like, what would be the nugget that you want people to hold on to in their lives?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Let's see. Let me explain it. Can I tell the story? Can I explain it in
Yeah,
a story?
and you need to tell us like, so explain it with a story. And I forgot to bring up like the question doesn't come. I mean, the smile doesn't come without a cost or whatever you're. Remember?
Right. So
Okay.
yeah, so that if I could sum up my life as that was the text, or that was the message, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be, this smile came at a cost.
Mm-hmm.
Smile, and I can't afford to frown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People say, "Oh, you smile all the time," and I'm just like, if you only knew what I had to go through to get this smile,
Mm-hmm.
I can no longer, I can't afford to frown. And so, with that being said, the advice I would give is this. So there was a skier, and the skier had an instructor, and the instructor kept calling out directions, and the skier would take the direction of from the instructor.
Mm-hmm.
However, this one particular day, there was a group of persons who attended the same slope, and they thought it'd be funny to sort of kind of throw jeering words to throw the skier off course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when the instructor told the skier to go right, they would say left. When the instructor would say left, then they would say right. However, they noticed something. They noticed that at the end of the slope, the skier made it to the bottom safely.
Hmm.
So they went down to the bottom of the slope, and the skier turned around, and the skier had on this bright yellow vest. And in front of the vest, it said caution, vision impaired.
Hmm.
So they're scratching their heads. How did you make it when we were jeering words and, throwing things at you? How did you still make it? And the skier said, I may not be able to see my instructor, but I know my instructor's voice.
Hmm.
And I knew the difference between what you were saying and what my instructor was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, as believers, we're walking this life by faith and not by sight. And a lot of people are wondering, how did you make it knowing you could not see everything your instructor was doing? You just simply tell them, I know my instructor's voice.
Hmm.
I know what God sounds like to me. Is it a ripple in the water? You know, I always tell people, whoever God is to you, let God lead you through that realm. Is God universe? Then let God speak to you through the trees and
Mm-hmm.
through the cosmic authorities, through the constellations. is God nature. Then let God speak to you through the rippling waters, through the winds, through the rain. Whoever God is, let God be. But just know the voice of God through that realm that you identify God as. Because I believe that skier made their way down with a smile on their face, saying they thought they could throw me off, but I knew my instructor's voice. So that's what I would leave. Smile and let people know I know my instructor's voice. Yeah, I know what God is saying, and that's the voice that you follow this season. Lean not to your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge the divine energy, and God will direct your path.
Yeah. Oh, you're amazing. So do you preach, like, are you guys recording your services? Like, if people wanted to listen to your sermons, they could just go to your church?
Sure. Visit our pages, 2 separate pages: Mount Zion United Methodist Church, Pocomoke, and St. James United Methodist, Pocomoke.
Okay. St. James. Okay. All right. I'm writing that down, and awesome. I'm going to make sure people know it. But Keisha, you're so great. Let me pray for you. Do you mind?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm going to mute myself, okay? So I can.
Sure. Okay. Almighty God, thank you so much for this time, for Keisha, for her stories, for everything, for her words, for her spirit, for who you created her to be. She is such a gift. She has been such a gift to me. She's a gift to all of the people that she encounters in her days. Just give her that assurance continuously, even in these liminal seasons that most of us do find ourselves in, as we wait and wonder what's next, or as we see what's next and are just too afraid to step in. Just guide her and direct her and bless her in ways that we would never even think to ask. We know that you've been doing that throughout her life, and that you are going to continue doing that as she goes forward. And I ask the same for everybody else here too. Anybody who's listening, anybody who finds themselves in a space that feels like wilderness, that they can turn to you and experience you in the way that you reveal yourself to them, that they can notice the ways that you work, and that they can notice the ways that you are involved in their life, so that even if they feel alone, they know that they are not alone. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lauren.
All right.
I'm praying for your family, praying for your ministry, praying for everybody. Love you all. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah. Keisha, you stay. I'm ending it for everybody. Bye, everybody.